Jalen Reagor? Like, that guy? Jalen Reagor? He's a Viking now. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast. Ooh-wee!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. And we got some news to go over. We had Cut Down Day show yesterday. If you missed it, I did the Cut Down Day show on Tuesday as the cut downs happened. I wanted to get that one out promptly. So that was kind of the Wednesday morning show, but early, and then nothing went out yesterday. So if you got confused by that, there were two shows that went out on Tuesday. And now we're back to the normal cadence. So go check that out if you missed it. There's also a mailbag Tuesday morning. So if you only listen to the cut down day one, you might have a mailbag too. Go check those out. Those Twitter Tuesdays are very fun. But today is Jalen Reagor Day, I suppose. And I guess Ihmir Smith-Marsette Day, because that is the headline of the day. The Vikings trade for Jalen Reagor in a deal that has been in the works for days, I guess. And to make room on the roster, they cut Ihmir Smith-Marsette. I don't know if they're done making moves either. Maybe we'll have another one to talk about tomorrow. But for now, that is probably worth spending the whole day on. It's, in the grand scheme of things, still probably small potatoes. Neither of those guys are going over 500 yards on the year, right? Like, they're wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 types. So that's all this is. But I'll give you the basic information. I also asked for a little bit of a breakdown from the Locked On Eagles guys. So I got something that I'm going to actually kick to pretty soon here. But I guess first, here's the bare bones information. Vikings trade for Jalen Reagor, and in exchange, they give up a 7th round pick next year and a 5th round pick or a 4th round pick the year after that, depending on how Jalen Reagor does specifically. It has not been reported, at least not as of this recording, what that condition is. It is something statistical, probably a yards or a touchdowns metric or something like that. I would guess a yards metric, maybe targets or receptions or something. But basically, if he produces enough, the 5th becomes a 4th. And if he doesn't produce enough, the 4th becomes a 5th. Either way, it's a 2024 day 3 pick. So that's fairly small. The 7th round pick is whatever. It's the 7th rounder that they got back in the Ross Blacklock trade. So they traded a 6th to the Texans and they got back Blacklock in a 7th. They take that 7th and then they give it to the Eagles for Reagor, and then they give them the pick next year as well. If you're unfamiliar, the rule of thumb for a pick next year is to put it down a round. So say I trade a 4th rounder in 2024, that's more like trading a 5th rounder in 2023. So you can think of it as a 5th or 6th conditionally and a 7th if you want to factor in that one of them is deferred. Small potatoes. Not that big of a deal. Still, what do we expect from Jalen Reagor? What's the expectation that draws? I guess that's the next question we have to answer. But I still want to kind of talk a little bit about background. The other big thing here is Jalen Reagor isn't making that much money in his base salary. 1.8 mil this year, 2.4 mil next year, all fully guaranteed because it's a rookie contract, but a big portion of that rookie contract is in prorated bonus, and all that sticks with Philly. So pretty cheap money-wise. Draft capital-wise, it might have made him a little bit more expensive. And I also personally kind of think that the round deferred thing, rule of thumb, sort of overrates deferring a pick. Like, a 4th rounder is a 4th rounder at the end of the day. But that's only my personal opinion. Like, that's the accepted wisdom is what you should probably go by. Either way, what that draws an expectation. What does that need to be? A wide receiver 3, a wide receiver 4? Does that need to be a 400-yard receiver, an 800-yard receiver? Think about that in your head of what Reagor needs to be to satisfy what we paid for him. And then once you've determined that, then we can start talking about, will he accomplish that? Will he be what he needs to be for that? but I don't know because we kind of have to think this out. So I'm going to think this out loud and work through it with you a little bit. But first things first, let me kick it to Gino Cammilleri of Locked On Eagles, who's got a little bit of background info and sort of the book on Jalen Reagor.
I'm Gino Cammilleri, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, to fill in our friends over at Locked On Vikings just what they are getting in Jalen Reagor. For Reagor in Philadelphia, it never worked out. It started hot. Week 1, back when he got drafted, he came out of the gates quickly, got the ball a few times, and then things went downhill from there. Reagor's biggest weakness is not being able to put the stuff off the field aside. He gets involved with beat reporters. He gets involved with fans, going at their criticism when he should be focusing on how to make himself better on the field. What you are getting in a positive light is a player who has athleticism. His straight line speed speaks for itself. What he did at TCU and the production that he had is something that if a team is willing, and for that price of a conditional 4th, even a 5th round pick, the Minnesota Vikings are going to take a chance on a guy who had upside that year and was picked just before Minnesota Viking wide receiver Justin Jefferson. It was a mistake from the Philadelphia Eagles to pass up on Jefferson in the first place. They end up with Jalen Reagor. Things never turned around. He has been surpassed on the roster by guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, even Quez Watkins, who was a 6th round pick the year that Jalen Reagor was drafted. Hopefully a change of scenery will help out the young player. He isn't even 25 yet. He still is on his rookie deal. And the Minnesota Vikings have a track record for developing athletic, young wide receivers that have the talent in their body. Just how can they harness it? I'm hoping nothing but the best for Jalen Reagor in his time in Minnesota. He was a player that I believe wasn't a fit for Philly when it comes to dealing with all the outside noise. Minnesota, in a media market that isn't as involved as it is in Philadelphia, hopefully he finds success on the field and is able to come to peace off the field with all the negative that has been said about him. He has been dragged through the mud in Philadelphia by many, many people, something that he didn't deserve. He didn't deserve to get the criticism of being drafted before Justin Jefferson. That's on the Philadelphia Eagles. That's not on him. So now he has a chance to go there with his draft mate and potentially develop that straight line speed, the ability to make plays with the ball in his hand, and the ability to be somebody that can move inside, move outside, be used in the backfield. You just want to get the ball in Jalen Reagor's hands. Does he fall victim of that, quote, manufactured touches label? I believe he does currently. He doesn't have that one-on-one playmaking ability where he's going to beat you with his route run. He was very raw coming out of TCU. But with guys like Adam Thielen there, Justin Jefferson, even a young KJ Osborne who developed from his time from University of Buffalo to Miami, even in Minnesota, the staff there, I believe they're taking a high-risk, high-reward, or low-risk, high-reward type of move. And if it pays off, the Philadelphia Eagles might be kicking themselves in a few years. So that'll do it for me, Gino Cammilleri. Enjoy your friend, Luke Braun, over at the Locked On Vikings podcast.
More on Jalen Reagor coming up. Also, we're going to talk about the Vikings cutting Ihmir Smith-Marsette to make room. That's a big surprise. But first, I want to talk to you about Elias Game Plan. It is an app that is like a sports betting and fantasy companion for NFL, NBA, and MLB. It lets you access team and player stats, head-to-head comparisons, and all sorts of extra tools to make sure that your Grambles are up to par and that you can win all your fantasy matchups and get that edge that everybody's always looking for. It's got all kinds of features like player injury analysis and a really nice and convenient place to get all the stats and all the different things that you might want to look up if you're deciding who to start in the flex this week or if you're trying to make a prop bet or something like that. Don't wait. Download the Elias Game Plan app today. And right now, I have a special offer for you. When you subscribe, get a 14-day free trial off of a monthly subscription plan, but only if you use promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word. Find Elias Game Plan Sports Betting in the App Store or Play Store today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the history documentary. I'm begging you. I'm pleading with you. I'm really proud of it, and I really want to share it with people. Episode 5 is out, been out all week. It also has some cameos in there from Sam Ekstrom, Arif Hassan, and Phil Mackey. They all have little moments in it. So that's really fun. Goes over the 90s. So you get Carter, Moss, Randall, Denny Green. That one game that it hurts. Get ready for that to happen. But I don't know. It's kind of an outpouring. Really fun stuff. And then episode 6, which is the 2000s, comes out this weekend. Moving on, I want to talk about Jalen Reagor now and try to evaluate him. But I guess I've had the whole break to think. My answer to the question of what Reagor needs to be to satisfy, what I'll say is a 5th round pick next year, because if he hits whatever statistical threshold that is that they give up a 4th for, I'm sure that means he's doing pretty well. So that sort of solves itself. So we'll say the lower part of the conditional, so a 5th in 24 and a 7th in 23. What is that worth to me? Not like much, right? Like if you do the deferred thing, it's a 6th and a 7th. What is a 6th and a 7th worth to you? Well, that guy's got to make the team, right? And he's probably got to make the team and be a contributor on it. He's got to be a rotational player, and I would like to see some plays out of him. Somebody in the Discord said like 400 yards would be a good threshold. Something like that seems fair. So Jalen Reagor has never had a 400-yard season. He's had like 200 some and almost for like 390 something or something like that. But it's also, here's where I'm at. If none of Jefferson, Thielen, or Osborne go down, that probably means that Reagor is never really tested, because he's only going to be a rotational guy, and those three are going to get the lion's share of wide receiver targets. And so whether or not he was good didn't end up mattering, and you bought an insurance policy and didn't need it, and that's fine. If one of those guys goes down, the first thing I'm watching is, does Jalen Naylor start getting the targets? Because if that's the case, then this is a bust. You're going to spend a 6th and a 7th rounder. They should probably beat out your 6th round rookie, especially a guy with Reagor's pedigree. And if he does, is he a liability? And I think if he's not a liability, I mean, he's not going to be as exciting. Like if Thielen goes down, Jalen Reagor is not just going to come in and be like, yep, I'm just as good. But if he's not a liability, if he's not running the wrong routes or whiffing on blocking assignments or dropping the ball, or like, then I'll probably be happy. So that's going to be the line I draw. And that's purposefully like an interpretable line. That we can go back in hindsight and kind of say, okay, was he a liability? Will be a subjective matter. And I sort of prefer it that way because it allows us a little bit of room to apply some context and nuance, which I'm always a big fan of. So that's going to be where it is. So will he be a liability? Maybe. I don't know if I love the odds of that. Especially considering that Ihmir Smith-Marsette was right there. The way that Gino talked about him was a lot more about like what's between the ears. And I've asked a couple of Philadelphia people, like, what's the deal with him? And it's a mental block. It's a mental thing. And the vibe coming out of Philly is that this guy succumbed to outside influence, that he didn't come along because he got too much flack. He crumbled under the weight of being the guy that they should have taken Jefferson instead of. And it just didn't work out. That it doesn't tell me as much on field. He's a really good athlete, really fast, and he's like ran a great 40, that kind of thing. Did not run a good 3-cone, and it does kind of look like that's about how he runs, where he's not like some shifty, like make you miss elusiveness guy, but he's got some burners on him. And then there was a drops issue. Like that's the one that I can't get past, is that there were like brutal drops in there. But he did have some plays. I guess his move is like a speedy deep post, especially against a safety who is playing on inside leverage, which usually is not means the post shouldn't be thrown. But he's actually won that rep sometimes. Like usually that's too much of a disadvantage for the receiver, and you would progress beyond it. If the safety's got inside leverage, or if it's a single high safety and you've got a deep post, now that deep post becomes you're just occupying the safety, but you're not actually an option in the progression if that's the case. Depends on the play. That's not always true, but I'm just talking like generalities. But he actually made some big plays like against a safety that should be in a position to make a play on him just because he's been able to speed past guys, both in college and in the pros. Like that translated. But the routes were sloppy. There was, it seems like there were problems mentally, like problems with um, discipline and finding the right routes and consistency and kind of the sort of stuff that you can't really pick out unless you knew what the play was supposed to be and you're the coaches. And that's why somebody like Quez Watkins would suddenly ascend past him on the depth chart. And everybody says, I've heard it so many times, of all the Philadelphia people I've asked about him, has all been change of scenery, change of scenery, change of scenery. So can a change of scenery be the reason that Reagor turns it around? But Gino said something else that I thought was really interesting, which was the manufactured touches thing, where apparently in Philadelphia, they kind of like, he wasn't just getting open and being part of progressions. It was like, okay, Jalen Reagor has some ability, is supposed to be a guy with ability after the catch. He's also supposed to be a returner, but they really didn't like him there. I believe he didn't catch him as cleanly, and he made bad decisions, and his talent didn't really come to fruition. But it seems like the Vikings like him as a returner anyways, and maybe they think that they can get more out of him in that. I digress. The manufactured touches thing is usually given to, Cordero Patterson types, guys that are not good at being wide receivers, but are really good with the ball in space. And shoot, Cordero Patterson just learned how to play running back and transitioned to that over like 5 years. I don't know if that's in the cards for Reagor. I don't think he has a body for that, but that's probably not what the Vikings do. This McVay offense has some jet sweepy things in it, and there are like screens, of course, and there are ways to like get a manufactured touch to somebody. But if you're going for, hey, let's get an elusive player the ball in space, that's going to be Dalvin Cook. So I don't think Jalen Reagor does that. I think Reagor is going to be Mr. Deep Bomb guy, and Mr. Clear Out, 4 wide, run a clear out route or a through route or whatever you want to call it, and maybe get a go ball down the sideline every once in a while, or have him do that thing. It just seems like he doesn't have a full route tree, I guess. And that's really difficult. The other thing is blocking, wide receiver blocking. If he can't block, he can't go on the field. And his blocking is very enthusiastic. Like, he likes block. He's talked to people, ask him about blocking. He's like, I love it. Yeah. I like getting physical. I like he takes a little bit of pride, I think, in the dirty work angle of it. And that kind of that blue collar, but it's also consistent. There are some whiffs on his tape. So how much do you trust it? All of that is really speculative, though, because it's how Philly used him versus how we'll use him. And those are really different offenses. And how he fits into a McVay style offense, I think, is as a deeper option, deep posts. I think he is a pretty cool weapon on like keepers, where you're rolling out and you can kind of put him on the backside of a keeper and he can run a deep post and has the speed to get all the way across the field and really deep and kind of be the over route on it or something. And some of that you just get open for free because the scheme worked, right? Depending if it's like a zone coverage or something. And then on like deeper hitches, he seems to be pretty good at chewing up route cushion or cornerback cushion. Corner lines up 10 yards off and you're running a curl. You need to eat up that 10 yards real quick and attack that corner so that they feel the need to back off. And then you turn it, like, that's how you're supposed to, the goal is to eat up that cushion really, really fast. He seems pretty good at that. But he's not breaking with a lot of explosiveness out of his routes, and that makes it a little more difficult to get separation. And then there's just the consistency, the drops, the problems. I'm pretty sure there might have been penalties too, if I recall, but I'm going off the dome there. So I don't know. Does he outsnap Jalen Reagor in the event of an injury, or Jalen Nailor in the God? We got Jalen Nailor and Jalen Reagor. Great, that's never going to mess me up. If he can outsnap Nailor and not be a liability, that's where I am. But I've talked about a lot of inconsistencies, and if he has a really limited route tree, that is being a liability, because that means there's certain plays you can't call if there isn't a route that Reagor can run on them, right? If you have to have Reagor on the field because you've had an injury or two in the wide receiver room, and now suddenly you have to start ripping pages out of the playbook, that's a liability. So I don't love it. I think that's where I'm at after talking this out. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's all very soft and wishy-washy, though, because we got to watch these guys play a game. And if we go through week 2 and Jalen Reagor has gotten 3 snaps, I wouldn't be surprised just because of the nature of the wide receiver room in front of him. And I wouldn't be disappointed in that either. It's like, oh, because the good guys stayed healthy. It's more about what happens if one of them gets injured. That's when this gets tested. And a couple of day 3 picks for an insurance policy. You're not going to find me arguing against that too hard. But what I really don't like is cutting Ihmir Smith-Marsette. I super disagree with that. That's what I'm going to get into next. Before that, though, I want to talk to you about safe driving. All right. Now, look, I don't know where you live in the world, but if you're in the United States, particular states like the one I live in, the one you probably live in, you can buy some of the devil's lettuce, some of that good old ganja, and have a good time. And I'm all for it. Have your fun. Just don't drive, man. That's real dumb. All right. Now, look, when you're high, it can feel like, I'm just it's a little buzz. It's fine. But if you feel different, you drive different. Your reaction times are slower. It's way more dangerous. And you don't feel slower, but like you are. Trust me. I've been the only not high guy in the room plenty of times. You are a lot slower than you think. Don't get behind the wheel. Just don't do it. Get a ride home. Call an Uber. Get a friend to drive you. Pick up your car later. It'll be fine, but don't drive. It's super dangerous for both you and all the other people around you. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, last part of this is going to be about Ihmir Smith-Marsette, and I hate it. I'm sad. I liked Ihmir Smith-Marsette, like, just as a player, as a person. I liked rooting for him, and that's probably factoring into this somewhat, but this is an on-field take, to be clear. I thought he was the 4th best wide receiver on the team. And that is, let me be perfectly frank, that's my own eye test. That's me going to camp, sitting in the bleachers and saying, that guy looks like he's better than everybody but Jefferson, Thielen, and Osborne. And then that confirming itself in the preseason, in my opinion. Didn't like him as a returner. Nobody did, right? He fumbled way too much. But as a receiver, I thought he played more than well enough to earn some reps, to earn some targets in this incredibly difficult room to earn targets in. I think he was genuinely a possible weapon. He was a deep bombs type guy, and that is very exciting. And so when the Vikings cut him to make room for Reagor, that surprised me a lot. And I'm still kind of trying to figure it out. So my best guess for why this is, because here's the deal. When I hate a move, and I kind of hate this, when I hate a move, my first everybody's first instinct is to go, gosh, how stupid the Vikings are. But that's kind of an arrogant thing, right? Like, I liked Ihmir Smith-Marsette a lot. Therefore, the NFL team filled with professionals and people who have forgotten more about football than I ever know are the dumb ones. Like, we don't really think that, right? So my goal is, okay, how can what don't I understand about this? That's what I'm trying to ask. What don't I get? What am I missing here? And I'm genuinely trying to figure that out. Like, what am I missing? And so I looked into it and looked at, kind of just racked my brain about Ihmir Smith-Marsette and what I already know about him. And here's my best bet. Reagor might be a little bit more of a versatile player. Ihmir Smith-Marsette, he's got the deep balls. He's got some pretty good routes. I think he runs better routes than Reagor, to be honest. But does he block as much? And maybe Reagor's a better blocker or a more willing blocker. I can't confirm or deny that. I haven't paid enough attention to either's blocking ability. And Reagor does have whiffs that I've seen. So I can't say he's a great, perfect blocker. But I wouldn't be surprised to go on the tape and say this is about blocking and find out that this is about blocking. That's the best angle that I have. Or maybe as Ihmir Smith-Marsette was dropping. Or maybe it's just, I like my guys and I don't like the old guys. And it could just be that. And I don't want it to be that. That would be really bad if it were that. But it certainly wouldn't be the first time that a new regime came in and said, I want the guys that I chose, not the guys I inherited, and just favors that. And look, Kwesi has gotten rid of like half the 2021 draft class already. This is the only one that wasn't like, it made sense to get rid of. Like, everybody else was like, well, you just didn't make the team. Sorry. This is one was like, no, you made a team. Like, you're good at the sport, but we're cutting you anyways. So I kind of feel like this warrants a little bit more explaining than, well, he's just like not my guy. But I'm sure that factors in, right? You're not going to have the same loyalty, and that might factor into why you didn't just cut Jalen Reagor, who is just like not a better receiver than Ihmir Smith-Marsette at this juncture. He's just like isn't, and you can't really. I don't think you can build an argument that he is. What you could build is like a special teams argument, right? I think Jalen Reagor was a sneaky good punt gunner, and that'll get you on a team, and that'll get you to stick on a team. But it's more about like, what could Ihmir Smith-Marsette do from there? Could he be a punt gunner? I don't know the answer to that. That maybe that factors into this too. Maybe we expect something out of Reagor on special teams as a punt returner, and Ihmir Smith-Marsette obviously lost that job, so it could be about that. But either way, as with all things, time will tell, and so we all can reserve the right to go back and say, oh, okay, well, Ihmir Smith-Marsette didn't stick on any team, and so actually Kwesi was right. Sure, that's all fine, and maybe Reagor turns it around. How funny would it be if Reagor turned it around on the Vikings after being like the other half of the Justin Jefferson thing, and then he goes to Justin Jefferson's team and then does well there, and the Eagles just got lose-lose? That would be absolutely hilarious. I sure am rooting for that outcome for a number of reasons. So tomorrow, if there's news, we'll do that. If there's not, maybe we'll talk a little bit McVay scheme or something else like that. But interesting times. May we always live in them. I will see you all tomorrow. Check out the Ultimate Football Preview. That is at Odyssey. It's an 8-episode extravaganza with all of the Locked On hosts and Odyssey experts previewing the 2022 season. You can find it wherever you find your favorite podcast. Just search out Ultimate Pro Football Preview. I'll see y'all tomorrow, and as always, Skol.